Hello and welcome to the Sideline Live podcast. My name is Orla Keeling and I am the host of the podcast, where every week we bring you a brand new episode with guests ranging from Olympic champions to local heroes, coaches, support staff and anybody involved in the world of sport. Each week we will dive into different topics, including current affairs in sport, identity, skill, mindset, coaching, and also shine a light on those flying under the radar. So tune in for brand new episodes, new stories, and new insights you've never heard before. Okay, delighted to be joined by Brian Geltzeiler of Sirius XM NBA Radio. He's also a contributor on NBA TV and plenty of other podcasts. Brian, thank you for joining me today.
It's my pleasure, Orla.
Give us an elevator pitch for the Irish listeners who maybe haven't heard you before. There's a couple probably recognising your voice.
Yeah, no, I host on Sirius XM NBA Radio, NBA Weekends. My show is 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Saturday and Sunday mornings. I do a little bit of work here and there for NBA TV, but as we'll dive into the interview, it's not as much as it used to be, but I'm still contributing here and there. And, again, do a lot of stuff on social media, on Instagram and on X, and having a good time with NBA basketball. There's a lot of things out there in this world that are tough and hard to talk about. Fortunately, basketball is not one of them.
In terms of your career, I was interested to learn that you work in finance, and
I do.
Yeah, how did you become an NBA contributor?
I was a blogger. I started blogging about the NBA just for fun. And I was very lucky in that I had a close friend that was a partner in a radio station in Houston, a sports radio station. And right around the time that LeBron James was doing the decision back in 2010, I was asked to come on one of their higher rated shows on Morning Drive in Houston, and it went well. Did a guest appearance 2 days later, had another close friend of mine referred me to a broadcasting agent who had some clients in the sports radio space and was able to kind of make me a professional sports radio guest. And for 3 years, I was doing radio hits all over the country with my website, my blog, but not making a dime for any of it. And so, I worked for free for 3 years. And one of the regular spots that I was doing radio hits was on Sirius XM. And I ended up getting a job there on a basketball show that they had. And I hosted 3 shows. I was a substitute host, and 3 shows in, I got the phone call the show was being put on sabbatical. So I was up, just when it starts, it ends. Well, in the meantime, that was in advance of something else. That was in advance of Sirius XM getting their own NBA channel. And I was offered the show that I do now that I've been doing for 13 years on weekends. So I do occasionally stuff during the week, but it's mostly weekends. And I was very blessed to have, friends that believed in me, that were willing to help me, and people to help me along the way. And I made a lot of relationships, which certainly helped. But it was, I definitely was very, very blessed to have the right people in my corner at the right time.
When you said you were trained and a couple of people mentored you to become a professional radio host, what does that look like? I have a couple of listeners.
Professional radio guests.
Or radio guests, sorry.
Radio guests.
Yeah, what does that look like for people listening that are young and aspire to be in the space?
Well, so what happens is this, and again, you need people to be interested in what you have to say when you are on the air. Like, that's the first thing. So one of the things I've always told young people in these kinds of situations, Orla, is you got to write. Like, people will read the written word, right? They don't, like, these days where everybody's got a podcast, it's hard to get somebody to download your podcast and listen to what you have to say. Now, again, the one advantage that you have in this day and age, and not that I came up so long ago, but the technology world and the social media world is always evolving, is you can put up short videos for people to get an idea, what you have to offer and what you have to say. So I would recommend to people that if you want to, you kind of have to target shows that you want to be on, put stuff on social media. And the beautiful part about X is that you can go ahead and mention somebody with a video or with a link to a piece that you wrote, with the hopes that they'll watch it or they'll read it. And so if you could, one of the things that was very helpful to me is I used to do columns on my old blog site, hoopscritic.com, and I would go through who I followed on X and I would send a link to the column in their mentions where and there was people in the business that were kind enough and generous enough to take the time to read it and would then correspond with me regarding opinions and advice and stuff like that. So I think what you had to do, X, which was called Twitter at the time, was a vital tool for me connecting with a lot of the people that I connected with and getting people to read me and then listen to me and want to put me on the air. So it's a grassroots effort that starts with social media. And again, X is just a wonderful outlet for it. It's just that the interface and how that works is really designed to be able to get you directly in touch with people in a way that I just don't think other social media outlets are able to do.
Yeah, I've downloaded Threads there recently. I had it for a while, and I was even interacting with Woj, Adrian Wojnarowski on that. But similar with X, it's a similar kind of platform. In terms of
Yeah, and by the way, he's a wonderful human being, Orla.
Yeah.
And he is a friend of mine that has, when I talk about people embracing me on X and following my work and advocating my work and giving me advice, Adrian is right there at the top of the list. He's a special guy and incredible at what he did when he did it. And now, blazing his trail in the college basketball world, trying to take a mid-major like St. Bonaventure and make them a national contender. He's a special guy. So I'm heartened to hear that you've had some positive interaction with him as well.
Yeah, well, he's a dream guest, so if you could connect us both, I'd love to have him. In terms of your building your own, building that platform, and what do you learn about not only networking, which you mentioned, and reaching out to people, but consistency and discipline when you're a busy guy and you're doing this on the side, just initially and also now because you're still busy and you're still doing all of this.
Listen, you have to try to keep. I'm going to say something to you that Donovan Mitchell said to me when I interviewed him last month during Cavs training camp. Got to keep the main thing the main thing. It was a great piece of advice because you need to have your priorities set on what you do, what you need to do, and what you don't do. And I'll give you an example. Like I was, for a period of time, part of how I grew a following on Twitter was a lot of live tweeting during games about things that I saw. But what I did find that started to happen is you spend too much time with your nose in your phone watching instead of watching the actual games because you have comments, you miss a lot. So I've cut back a little bit on that only because I think it's important for me to have more of a macro and a global perspective about what's happening in a game as opposed to play. And that's my example of keeping the main thing the main thing. Like it's great that I tweet and it's good to build followers and all that's fine. But if doing that is coming at the expense of me watching enough and seeing enough of what's going on the floor that I'm able to talk about it in an informed and analytical and educational way to my audience when I go on the air on the weekends, well, if my tweeting's taking away from that, then the tweeting's not keeping the main thing the main thing. And I think that's a really important piece of advice is focus and understanding what is going to get you to the level that you want to get at and then actually doing it, because knowing it is one thing, putting the work in and day over day and stacking days is the harder part. And that's what, it's easy to have the conversation, but to take the advice from the conversation and apply it to your life on a daily basis, well, that's the hard part. And that's where I think when I look at all of it, it's having priorities and then taking those priorities and balancing your life with them, because you have to have some balance in terms of what's important and what's not as important. So I go back to Donovan Mitchell, you keep the main thing the main thing.
How do you find being visible and open to criticism online, being a contributor and, commenting on basketball?
Yeah, this is going to sound very, very trite and almost obnoxious. I kind of don't care, Orla. Like, I've had such awful things said about me online on social media that I laugh at all criticism. Now, listen, do I read it? Sure. Are there times where some criticism is fair? There's no doubt. And I try to be someone that publicly owns it. None of us are right all the time. And listen, I've made mistakes. When I look back at my whole Twitter persona, and the way I used to argue with people on Twitter, I'm actually frankly a little ashamed of it, because I think it was me getting petty, and not, and as time's gone on, my skin has thickened significantly, and I just kind of don't care. Like, I laugh at criticism. I did a little segment a couple weeks ago on my radio show with my partner Sam Mitchell, where I asked him, I'm like, what do you think people's biggest criticisms of our show is online and of you? And because I had read them, and he was laughing at me saying, you really read this stuff? I'm like, I do read the stuff. I read this stuff because I number one, maybe one of these nuggets actually has a kernel of truth to it, and it makes me better at what I do. Number two, if I'm not going to let it hurt my feelings and get all up in my feelings, that some of it's humorous and some of it that I laugh at. The harder challenge for me has been training my family, my children, and my wife to feel the same way, to be able to look at that criticism, if you see it or it comes up, and laugh it off and not take it personally. That's been the larger challenge. For me, say whatever you want about me. I don't worry about it. I know who I am. I know what I am. I know what I do. I'm very, very comfortable in my own skin, very secure with where I am in my life. But my wife and my kids, they get fired up. They want to protect me. So that's the part where I've had to say to them, we don't fight those battles online. We just let that stuff go. We let it roll off our backs, and treat it as the noise that it is. So I think that's been really the most important part, because there's one of the things that I pride myself on the air, Orla, is to be able to be self-deprecating, to be able to laugh at myself, because I think it makes you relatable. And I think the audience feels like they can engage in that when they know that you have a sense of humor, when you know you'll take the microphone and be like, geez, was I wrong about that? And boy, am I an idiot. Stuff like that makes people kind of like you. It humanizes you to your audience. And I'm a human being, and I like to show, listen, I joke around sometimes that I play a character on radio. I really don't. It's just kind of an enhanced version of my regular personality, but a little more animated. I'd like to be a little more reserved in person than I am on the air. As you know, when you met me the other day, like I want to be warm, but I don't want to be over the top. When I'm on the air, my job's to be a little bit over the top. So you have some of that. So when there's criticism about me that comes off as personal, I don't really take it as that way, because it's not personal, and it's not really me they're criticizing. It's the dude that's on the radio. I hope that makes sense. It's, because it is part, I am part of that dude that's on the radio, but it's not necessarily me to my core, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, totally. You have an on-air persona and an off-air persona.
Correct.
You're not changing the person that you are, and I'm probably working on that in terms of my voice. I'm very monotone. I need to work on getting higher and getting lower, and as you say, it's different when you're on air.
It is.
Yeah.
If I could give you one piece of advice that's really, really important, okay? One of the things, and I'm blessed in this way because it has not been hard for me, but I'm lucky that it's not hard for me. More people than not, it is hard. And that's a level of energy. So, like, one of the things that I was taught that was really important, that can be a differentiator, is relentless energy on the air. Because I will tell you, Ian Eagle taught me this lesson, and it's one of the most valuable lessons he ever taught me. Yeah, everybody has off days. You do something long enough, you have off days. It happens. We're human beings. He said, but you also have to approach every time you're on the air, there's somebody listening to you for the first time ever, and they deserve the best version of you. So that version of you that they get gives them a great first impression, because the old saying of you can never make a second first impression is 100% true. So that energy level each and every time. And if you bring that energy level, you don't have to focus on voice inflection, because it just happens. You know what I mean? So the energy part, I think, is vital to being able to be on air, because people feed off that. People love that. They feel that energy. And so if there's energy and there's humor involved and the willingness to laugh at yourself, now these are all of a sudden, you're stacking up relatable traits that people enjoy and want to listen to.
Brilliant. Thanks for the advice there. I'm interested in the evolution of the media space. We see a lot of independent podcasts coming up, like, for example, your own, your blog website, but also from a player perspective of the player-driven media. I was listening to Mind the Game this morning with Steph Curry, LeBron, and Steve Nash. 10 years ago, we wouldn't hear from those guys. What's your thoughts on the evolution of player-driven media?
Well, what's interesting, and one of the other examples I like to use is Draymond Green, with his Draymond Green show. Draymond Green is he's almost like pioneered it a little bit, because Draymond Green is not just doing a player podcast to hear Draymond Green talk. Draymond Green's got opinions. He's strong about him. He doesn't care who he gets mad. And I do think there is something to that. I think it's compelling, and I think Draymond Green's going to be an incredible media star. Something like Mind the Game is very interesting because LeBron James is a brilliant basketball player. Steve Nash was a brilliant basketball player, and I love him on Amazon because I just think everything that he says is thoughtful and analytical, and it's just the way his mind works. And I love hearing from Steph Curry because the way he's approached the game of basketball has been revolutionary and unorthodox. And he's changed the game individually in ways that maybe Steph Curry may have changed the way NBA basketball is played more than any other player of our generation. That includes Michael Jordan. That includes LeBron James, just because of how he's made, the three-pointer cool in the way that he has. And listen, not all of it's positive, yet Steph is an incredibly positive figure for this league and the league's history. My point being is that those are some examples of really good podcasts. You are getting, just like you would with any space, the advent of some podcasts that are incredibly negative. Some of the things that come out of Patrick Beverley's podcast, especially recently, some of the crude stuff, like some of the stuff that happens on Gilbert Arenas' podcast, some of the hot take stuff that you hear, whether it's Amon Shumpert or Jeff Teague or, Theo Pinson earlier this week talking about the Rockets need to trade, Şengün or Amen Thompson for Kyrie Irving, like insanity like that. So the space is flooded, and it's probably flooded a little too much. But I think sticking to people that kind of want to dig into the meat and potatoes of the game of basketball, whether it's current players or former players, instead of sensationalizing things to try to get downloads and social media hits. I think that's kind of what you have to stick to. But there's a lot to sift through to be able to get to that point because there's so much podcast content out there. And each of these, retired players are trying to make their mark in their own way, because if you do make your mark and you get those downloads and a big company buys you up, there's a lot of money there. So there's a lot of that, but I do think what's happened is that the hot take specialists, there's so many of them right now that so much of it has become noise. And I think for some of these former players, when they take on a persona like Patrick Beverley has as a hot take specialist, that's only going to take you so far, because ultimately the big money in doing this is to get taken mainstream. So when you're doing that stuff, you're not going to necessarily get taken mainstream. But even Patrick Beverley, that's on the Barstool platform, isn't necessarily considered mainstream. If you look at what Barstool's doing, they are working towards being a major mainstream factor, and I think they're kind of almost there already. Even at Dave Portnoy's changed his persona. They brought in Ryan Russillo, who is one of my all-time favorites. I always say this: Bill Simmons, Ryan Russillo, and Brian Windhorst are my Maddox, Smoltz, and Glavin of podcasters. I everything those guys do, I listen to those three. So when you see what Barstool's doing, they're going in that mainstream direction. Some of the stuff, the hot take stuff, I think is kind of going to fall by the wayside sooner rather than later, just because we have a preponderance out there of so much intelligent podcast programming. It just, sometimes it's finding a needle in a haystack to get to it.
What did you think of Michael Jordan doing some media this year's time?
Where's it been, right? We would love to hear from him after all these years. And don't get me wrong, Michael Jordan's earned the ability to do what he wants to do with his life. But I love hearing from Michael Jordan. I love hearing from Michael Jordan talk about load management, which is something that wasn't on the radar with him, and he never even would have considered. It's incredible that he has a platform now. We can hear him talk about modern day NBA basketball. Like I love that he has this. I love that we're doing this with him. And I understand, as an owner of a team, it was a hard thing for him to do. He really wasn't able to. And frankly, wasn't the best NBA owner in the world. And I don't blame him. Listen, he wanted to make money, and sometimes NBA owners, to be successful, have to forego making a lot of money. So, and I don't blame him. He owned it and ran it as a business. With all that said, I think we're, as an NBA consuming public, we are much better off for hearing these, even if it's on a monthly basis, but for getting some thoughts from Michael Jordan about what's going on with the league currently.
What are your thoughts on the evolution of the media space? You mentioned Amazon coming in, they're taking rights and have, former players part of their panels. YouTube got involved a number of years ago. Just the evolution of, the coverage of the game, and from a terrestrial TV point of view, it is evolving.
It's evolving, and I think in a very, very positive way. I think what you've seen in a transition from TNT that's over to now three different packages and having Amazon and NBC, I think has been like something that was necessary. And I want to be careful what I say here regarding TNT and Turner because they employed me for a time when I worked at NBA TV. There's a lot of good people over there, but I do think at a certain point in time, they stopped investing in the on air product. And when that happens, it's apparent to your audience. And yes, there was a lot of money that was being thrown at the inside the NBA guys, but there was not much underneath that. And I think that part of the problem was they were investing so much in that that they didn't invest in much underneath that. Now what you have with ESPN essentially taking inside the NBA on loan and not touching the show, which was been brilliant of them. Instead of trying to put their own stamp on it, if it ain't, it's an old saying, if it ain't broke, Orla, don't fix it, right? And they didn't try to touch that. But I love what NBC's done with their studio work. I think their studio work's excellent. I think the quality of the game announcers is really good. I've enjoyed Mike Tirico being back in that space, one of the great play-by-play guys. Reggie Miller it almost seemed like Reggie Miller was getting stale at the end of TNT and has kind of rededicated himself to the craft, being NBC's lead guy. I love their studio guys. I think McGrady, Vince Carter, Carmelo Anthony are excellent. My guy, Brian Scalabrine, who's my friend who works at NBA Radio with me, Scalabrine is excellent diagramming stuff and is really a brilliant basketball mind. And it's great to be able to learn from that. And then I think what Amazon's doing is really good. Blake Griffin's got a way of talking about guys and criticizing them without hitting them over the head with it. And I just think it's smart and it's intelligent. I mentioned Steve Nash earlier, how much I enjoy him. I think even the lead host stuff, Taylor Rook's excellent. Maria Taylor, excellent. These are pros. And so I really like what they've done. And a big part of that is Amazon and NBC saying, hey, we not only paid all this money for league rights, but if we want these ancillary shows to be able to do ratings that go hand in hand with games, well, we have to invest in them too. And I think it's a smart strategy for them. And ultimately, when they can get some ancillary programming off of what they're doing in the NBA, there's a lot of money for these companies to be made by making these significant investments. So the fact that Amazon and NBC, ESPN's always invested financially in the programming. I can't be critical of them in any way, shape, and form. They always have done that. Now seeing Amazon and NBC making meaningful investments in ancillary programming outside the games, I think is really, really a net positive for the league. I think this new broadcasting deal and how it is great for the fans. It's great for the league. And frankly, they're getting their money's worth early on. We're seeing ratings that we haven't seen in 10 plus years in the NBA for October and November games. So there's a lot of buzz being generated in the league, and there's a younger demographic that's diving into the league in a way that I don't think we saw 10 years ago.
Speaking of demographic, NBA Europe, what are your thoughts on it?
It's going to happen. It's going to take more time than I think people think for it to happen. And and I think it's a great idea. I think it really is. I'm looking forward to seeing how all that shakes out. But I think it's really important for the NBA to take their time and do it right. And I think it's one of those other things where you have to walk before you can run. And my point being there is if you're going to put a league in place, you can't turn around and have 24 teams to start. Like you're going to have to do this almost with a WNBA-ish model. Well, we'll start out with 10 or 12. Let's make a footprint in some important markets first and get it going there. And then over time, we will start to expand it once we make our footprint initially. But I think, again, it's a financial venture to make money. The market is certainly there for NBA Europe. There's no doubt. But you just have to make sure that you leave some margin for error, because when you're launching a league like this and you're doing something that's almost, a pioneering type of thing, you need to make sure that you're not going to understand you're not going to do it right 100% of the time. You're going to make mistakes. So I think they have to be completely prepared to be able to do that. And the best way to be able to weather your mistakes is to start slow. So I think it's going to happen. I just think it's going to take some time. And I think when it does start, I don't think it's going to be a huge splash early on. I think it's going to incrementally build and grow.
Yeah, especially when they're coming up against a EuroLeague brand and the clubs that are there, particularly basketball in Serbia. They don't have an expansion team there yet. Maybe they will, but their teams are religion and they have history behind them, and Europeans aren't quick to give up that history.
And that's a great point, Orla. The other great point is this, getting players, right?
Yeah.
pulling players from these teams. Okay, these European leagues, they have been in existence for a very, very long time. And so to be able to pull players in from there, it may not be as easy as the NBA would like it to be early on, because that's where you're going to have to start. That's where you're going to pluck players from. And then I think the other thing is in NBA EuroLeague, you're going to get some guys who have been in the NBA and are not in the NBA anymore that look to use that to be on stage and be able to get back in the league. So you'll have that. You'll have young players who maybe would normally go play in China or something. Well, they'll go play in NBA Europe instead there. So you're going to have growth from a couple of those spots, but there's no doubt you're going to have to pull players from European leagues, especially early on.
Yeah, it seems that they've changed. There was a lot of talk years ago about bringing a team back to Seattle, the expansion within the US up to Vancouver and maybe down to Mexico City. They seem to have moved away from that and kind of focusing on Europe. Is that correct?
Well, so yes and no. They were, but it's not off the radar. They want to get Seattle back a team soon. I think where you have questions is, does Seattle get an expansion team? And I know that the league's board of governors very much wants an expansion team in Seattle and very much wants an expansion team in Las Vegas. The issue is, do you create expansion teams? There's more than enough talent to do it. So that's not necessarily a problem. I don't think you water down the league. And let's face it, the owners all pocket a significant sum of money with these expansion fees. I think where the league's a little bit concerned is what's happened with the local and regional TV deals in a lot of these smaller markets. And before we jump in to take all this expansion money, are we better off looking at a couple of the 30 teams that we have and maybe relocating them? Like and I hate, there's good basketball fans in New Orleans. There's just not enough of them. And so that's a team that's on the radar. The Pelicans are really bad. They don't have their pick this year. And if you look in the stands, when you watch Pelican games on League Pass, short of Jokic or Curry or LeBron, or Luka being in the building, place is empty. No one's sitting in the upper bowl. Place is empty. And so at one point or another, and you don't have a local TV deal at all. Memphis is another location. That situation doesn't look great right now. They don't have a great local TV deal. You worry a little bit about a place like Charlotte, especially because college basketball rules the day on Tobacco Road. So you worry about that too. My point being is, I think with the local TV deals collapsing, with FanDuel essentially having to come in and put their name on some of it to keep it rolling, some of this, I think the NBA has to look at, before we start to add teams, okay, we need to concern ourselves with the lack of financial health on a couple of the teams that we have right now, and maybe they're better off elsewhere. And if they're better off elsewhere, then there's got to be some realignment in terms of the conferences. So I think what the NBA discovered, it's very easy to put two expansion teams in and say there's enough players, let's pocket all that money. That's fine. But I think they realize with the teams we have, there's a little bit of wood to chop. And don't get me wrong, most of the teams of the league are thriving financially. The other thing to keep in mind is you collect the expansion fees once, right? But when you are taking in the level of national TV money the league is taking in, and you take two expansion teams in, you're all of a sudden dividing that money by 32 instead of 30. Okay. And that's annually. That's every year. So it cuts into what you're taking in annually, and then you're going to need the TV deals to continue to grow, and those may reach critical mass at one point or another. So it's a very interesting balancing act. Do we move teams to those markets, or do we add teams to those markets? And I think that some of that is what's going on in terms of the league office and the board of governors in figuring out what the next steps are regarding expansion.
Have you seen the effect of NIL, all the transfer portal in college, and how that will be a knock-on for the NBA in the years to come?
Well, so I think what's interesting about how that affects the NBA is college basketball has become an older sport. And in recent years, because the preponderance of analytics in draft evaluation has made it, and it's interesting you asked that question, because and I kind of feel like analytics has played too big a role in draft evaluation. Let me explain what I'm talking about. So you take a look at who has success coming out of college. The analytics will tell you that younger players have more success coming out of college than older players, which have made teams lean more towards younger players. Here's the problem with that mindset and just using the numbers. Generally, the reason that younger players have had more success is because younger players are drafted because they are more talented. Okay. That's the bottom line. They're more talented. And what's happened, it's created a bias against older players. And that creates draft misses. I go back to the Knicks 2 drafts ago. Pacome Daddier, who's a good young player, but Terrence Shannon's a rotation player right now. And again, there were some financial considerations there. But my point being is that Shannon wasn't drafted because he was 24 years old. He was drafted late in the round. He may be one of the 10 best players out of that draft. So there's a bias against older players. But college basketball is becoming an older sport. So what's going to happen? And I think you saw it in this year's draft. There's a shift starting to come. Walter Clayton Jr. the Jazz traded up to select him. He's 23 years old. So they didn't shy away from that older player bias. In so many ways, the older players are more ready to contribute immediately. So this NIL world that has, college basketball essentially looking a little more like the pros with the way guys are getting paid. And then you turn around and you have it where college basketball is, you may add a year of eligibility. Guys are getting 5 years. Junior college years don't cut into your eligibility anymore. It's going to be an older sport. Ultimately, the NBA is going to, and NIL's kind of created that. Okay. Ultimately, the NBA is going to have to adjust how they look at the draft because more and more college players coming into the league are going to be older because college basketball is an older sport. They're going to have to throw some of those analytics out and be able to evaluate older players because sometimes the learning curve's longer for guys. Just because a guy's 23 years old doesn't mean he's done getting better. 27 years old, 28 years old, different ballgame. 23 years old doesn't mean he's done getting better. But I think that's been a kind of groupthink in the NBA, and you're starting to see, gaps form in that, and teams looking to take advantage of some of those inefficiencies because that to me is a massive, massive inefficiency in how analytics are applied to draft evaluation. And that to me, all of that is going to change. And the engine that has been kind of the catalyst to make it start changing is NIL.
Yeah. I'm going to throw 3 fire round at you. I want an answer for Rookie of the Year, MVP, and a champion for the Eastern and Western Conference, if you can answer that.
Okay, well, so I'm going to start with MVP. It's very hard for me to see a scenario where Shai Gilgeous-Alexander doesn't repeat. The team's incredible. He's played at a really high level. Early in the year, Jalen Williams I voted for him third team All NBA last year, and he made third team All NBA. That's his other All NBA guy hasn't played in a game. Team's lost one game. The guy's been unbelievable. Unbelievable. They're undefeated with Holmgren in the lineup. So SGA is going to be my MVP. Rookie of the Year has become a little bit of a tough one. I picked Cooper Flagg when the season began, and I'm still quite confident in him winning the award, and I will stick with him. But there's 2 other guys that have kind of entered this conversation that I think are very interesting. One of them is VJ Edgecombe. And the Sixers are good. And he plays a significant role as a starter on a team that is tracking to be a playoff team. And he's a really important piece there. And I think that it's easier than being on a team like Cooper Flagg is that's really bad. And I don't know, the Mavericks stay bad all season once Anthony Davis gets back, but I just don't know they're above 500 team. So they're going to be a lottery team regardless. So is that used against Flagg and Rookie of the Year votes? Well, maybe. And then the other guy is on a bad team, but I love this player, and I can't have a Rookie of the Year conversation without bringing him up, and it's Derek Queen. I worry about Derek Queen that this horrible trade that the Pelicans made with trading the unprotected pick to trade up to get him follows him around. But he's got like some Jokic stuff in his offensive game. The passing, the handling of the ball, the way he plays so well out high at the top of the key, shooting. He's an excellent, excellent young player that's been really impressive here early on. If the Pelicans weren't so bad, I think he'd be more prominent in that Rookie of the Year conversation. And another one, let me just mention another one. Cedric Howard of the Grizzlies will get hurt by the fact that they're a bad team. He's been excellent early on, and another great find by Grizzlies GM Zach Kleiman.
Yeah. In terms of
the finals. I didn't give you the finals. Let me give you the finals real quick. I picked Denver and the Knicks when the season began. And I'm still very confident on both. If I've waned a little bit in confidence here 1 month into the season on one of them, it's not the Nuggets. It's actually the Knicks, because I think the Detroit Pistons may be ready way before any of us ever thought they were ready. They've impressed the heck out of me. I'm still sticking with the Knicks as that pick, but I will tell you, I got my eye on the Pistons for as well as they've played here early on.
Brian, I want to ask you, and I might need your help. Who should I get on? And if you name someone, I need your help to get them on as a guest.
Well, so Very interesting. Let me think for a minute. Who could you get on as a guest? I will tell you this. I'll give you a great person to get on, and I could probably help you get him on because he is a very fun guest. I would have my colleague at NBA Radio, Justin Termini, would be someone that I think you should spend some time talking to, because very few follow the league as well as Justin. Justin is incredibly opinionated, and he doesn't care who, for lack of a better term, or he doesn't care who he pisses off. And I think that's something that is a little bit of a lost art in the days where everybody is conscious of what you're saying in the media, and at times will restrict access from you when you are critical. And I've suffered from that as well, where I've been critical and they've restricted access. I don't let it phase me, although I try to keep my criticism as A, as fair as possible, and B, to be diplomatic when it calls for it in terms of how I criticize and the words that I use, by the same token, getting my point, my opinion across. Justin Termini throws diplomacy out the window. There's no such thing as him being diplomatic. And I think he'd be a really interesting guest for you because his story is a great story. He's really talented as a radio host. He knows his basketball really well, and he's also a heck of a lot of fun. He's an interesting mix between an egomaniac and someone that's extremely self-deprecating. So to me, that would be Justin Termini would be my choice for you.
Perfect. I'm going to fly through the sideline 7. It's the same 7 questions at the end of every episode, conscious of your time. Brian, what's your favourite quote?
Tony Soprano, those that want respect, give respect.
Love it. Question 2, best sporting event you've been to. Pick one as a fan and one that you worked at.
Okay, so as a fan, Game 5 of the 2000 World Series between the Yankees and the Mets. And it was a painful one because my Mets lost the World Series that day. But Al Leiter threw like 150 pitches trying to keep the Mets in the game. In the end, Luis Sojo won that game on a seeing eye ground ball base hit up the middle to win for the Yankees. But it was being there for a historic event as a New York baseball fan. And I hate the Yankees with a passion, and I love the Mets. So that was a really, really interesting one to be at. Covering, I'm going to go a little more recent with what I've covered. 2 years ago, I was covering a second round playoff series against the Sixers and the Celtics, and I was in Philadelphia for a game 5, where the Sixers played 3.5 awesome quarters of basketball, and were just in the pole position to be able to take a 3-2 lead and be able to win that series. And what happened? Jason Tatum happened. Jason Tatum at that point was, I believe, I want to say 0 for 11 on the game and couldn't hit a shot, and Tobias Harris was shutting him down. And Tatum drained 3 threes in a row in the fourth quarter of that game to completely turn the game around and shock the Sixers. Joel Embiid didn't touch the ball for the final 5 minutes of the game. For the Sixers, it was the James Harden show, and we know what James Harden has done in the past in big playoff spots. It was an incredibly interesting game to cover because I was in both locker rooms afterwards, and in being in both locker rooms afterwards, by being in the Celtics locker room, you knew they were going to win. They were winning that series. That was it. They knew they had that. That was their bad game, and they found a way to win it on the road. And the Sixers were incredibly demoralized. And I remember sitting in Joel Embiid's media availability and have him pretty much say, how do I not get the ball there? And normally I'm not much of a fan of a guy criticizing his teammates in front of the media after a game. I thought it was quite appropriate, and Doc Rivers echoed it. But all of that, it took the air out of the balloon for the Sixers. It was just one of those incredible things to see a team on the cusp of doing something great completely collapse at the expense of a team that was the eventual NBA champion that year, the Boston Celtics. And watching how that one comeback was the wind beneath one team's wings and just completely deflated the other. And to just, it was one of those games where when you're in both locker rooms after the game and you're covering it, you do understand the importance of psychology and how that works. So that to me was really, really interesting in how all that played out.
Amazing. Question 3, biggest setback or challenge so far in your career, and how did you react to it?
So this is interesting. I was in a situation where when I worked for NBA TV, when NBA TV was operated by Turner Broadcasting, where I was a regular on a show called 10 Before Tip for 3 years as a studio analyst. My dear friend Jared Greenberg was the lead host. They were creating a new pregame show that year called The Warm Up. And they ultimately had auditioned me to do a role that was going to involve some fantasy basketball, but more to be a gambling specialist, which is something that, I'm hyper aware of that world, and I'm pretty good at it. And was, auditioned a couple of times, got nothing but positive feedback, and was very, very excited. And was told, after I was told the job was mine, 5 days a week. They came back to me and said, well, we're going to have you share it with somebody and only have you do 2 to 3 days a week. And I was okay with that too. Okay, we're going to send you a contract and, let's go. Never got the contract. Waited, 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 waited. And the day before the season started, I finally reached out to the talent department. I said, we're supposed to start this week and I don't have a contract. And they said, yeah, we'll get right back to you. Got a phone call. They had decided to go in another direction with somebody else. And I was the last one to know. And that was hard because I loved being on TV. Being on TV, it's almost like a little bit of a drug. Like you have to kind of take it in moderation, enjoy it while you're there. It's a high, but understand it can be taken from you like that. And it was certainly taken from me, and in a way that was kind of hard to handle, for lack of a better way to put it. So, but what I decided to do was, check my ego at the door, keep my head down, keep working, keep up communication with them as much as I felt like they screwed me. And it worked out because I ended up doing, some stuff for them gambling wise over a 2-year period. A year after that, COVID came. They actually were going to bring me back before COVID came. Then COVID came, and then they actually did bring me back for a little while after COVID. But that was one of those things where I just had the air taken out of my balloon. And it taught me so many lessons about how this business works, what can happen, and how, listen, when it's good news, they tell you quick. When it's bad news, you're always the last to know. And so I kind of, it's the biggest thing with that was to say, okay, if you want to continue to work on television, you have to absolutely check your ego at the door and have the understanding that, they can take this from you at any point in time. And you have to always be prepared to do that. And every time you step on the air, you can never have an off day. You're fighting for your broadcasting life every single on-air appearance that you do.
Brilliant. On the flip side, your biggest achievement in or outside of sport?
That's easy. That's my 4 children. And that's one that's, I have 4 kids, 3 daughters and a son, 24, 22, 21, and 16. And my 3 girls are all, 2 are college graduates. One is about to be a college graduate with a job waiting for her when she gets out. And my girls have had professional achievement at a young age, all great students, all wonderful human beings. Couldn't be prouder of them. My son is, this is obviously biased. I think he's an incredible young man. I couldn't be prouder of the young man that he has grown into, not only from a family standpoint, and a friend standpoint, but he is, his work ethic is what he does. He's as you know, he is a high school basketball player, and he is, pushes through whatever challenges are in front of him. He is relentless in his work ethic, and just and when he gets on the floor, he's a tough guy. He is a competitor. He doesn't take crap from anybody. He plays with a manic intensity that I admire, and that's kind of how he approaches his life, except for his personal life and his family and his friends, where he's compassionate and sweet. So, like, I look at my 4 kids, and each of them individually, they're all different people and different kinds of people, but I couldn't be prouder of who they are and what they are. And that's, so when I look at kind of anything that I've done in my life, like everything else, whether it's professional or personal with close friends and all that, and I love my life and I'm proud of it. With all that said, there's nothing besides my wife's right up there too, and I have a wonderful marriage, and I feel blessed in that as well. So, like, my kids, my wife, my family, that's what I am most proud of.
Brilliant. Brian, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
This is a great question. And here's what I will say. And I'm going to peel some layers back for myself here in answering this question. I would have taken care of I would have told my young self, take care of your body better. Take care of your body. Okay. Have your diet be right. Exercise. Just take pride in how your body looks on a day-to-day basis, because that keeps your body healthy. And as I get older, I realize that, listen, stuff can break. Things can go bad. You can keep yourself in the greatest shape, eat right, and do all that, and things can still go bad. But you got to give yourself the best chance. And it's something over the course of the last, 15 months of my life that I've taken on. And I'm so thrilled that I did it. And my only regret is that I didn't do it sooner. So when I would say to my young self, as much as you love being an overeater, and that's a hobby and something you enjoy to do, and you sitting on the couch is a whole lot more fun than going to the gym and lifting weights. Well, it's come to a point in my life where it's actually not, where I love being in that gym every day lifting weights. It's become a vice in the best, most healthy way possible. And I'm glad that I did it, and I'm proud that I did it. With all that said, I would tell my younger self, you should have been doing this a long, long time ago.
Question 6, dream dinner guest and why?
So this was a question that I love, and I pondered this for a while. The easy answer is, for me being an NBA guy and loving the league like I do and working within the league, I can say Pat Riley. He would be the one guy within the league that I would love to do that with. But I also will say this, Orla, I pride myself on being a more well-rounded person than just have it be basketball. And I hope I've gotten some of that across here too. So if I'm going to look outside the basketball world for the one person I want to have dinner with, it's Taylor Sheridan. Taylor Sheridan I love TV, and Taylor Sheridan is a brilliant TV showrunner. I look at what he created with Yellowstone and the incredible, deep, rich characters he created there that's allowing him to take that show, which ended, into 2 spin-offs. Plus, he did the Yellowstone backstories, which were brilliant and incredibly done. But then I look at what else is created. Listen, I'm a huge fan of the TV show The Sopranos. And if James Gandolfini was still alive, he would have been my default answer, because I would have loved to spend time with him just mining his career. And he's a Jersey guy like I'm a Jersey guy. So that would have been the answer. But he's not here anymore. So Taylor Sheridan, Landman, with Billy Bob Thornton, is my favorite show since The Sopranos. It's just brilliant and incredible, and Billy Bob Thornton's amazing, and Demi Moore and the star power he's brought in. But even a show like Lioness with Zoe Saldana, Nicole Kidman, and Morgan Freeman, I never thought that'd be a show I'd like. I watched that. I loved it. It's brilliant. Listen, Sylvester Stallone's had this incredible career, whether it's been Rocky or Rambo. Taylor Sheridan made him a mob boss on Tulsa King, and he's awesome in it, and it's brilliant, and I love it. And some of the storylines in the show are a little thin here and there, but the character development of Sly Stallone as a mob boss has been absolutely terrific. And then, of course, I'd be remiss in mentioning this one last. The Mayor of Kingstown with Jeremy Renner the show keeps kind of going in circles, but they've written it that with these problems and these issues in this town never do end because of the nature of the prisons and the gangs and all of it. And it's incredible. It's just so brilliantly done. So you think about that, 5 shows, current, topical, all of that right now. One man has created all of that. I find that amazing. I would love to sit with Taylor Sheridan, think about what makes him tick, that has his hands in all of these shows, and where does he come up with these characters and the creativity behind it. To me, that would be more, as much as I would love to talk to Pat Riley about history and how he's run the Heat and some of his experiences as a player and a coach and an executive. Taylor Sheridan, to me, is just more topical and more current. Will be incredibly interesting to sit down and have over dinner. Plus, the other thing is this: I know Taylor Sheridan would have a couple cocktails with me. You know what I mean? So that would be a fun part too.
Yeah. Final question before I let you go, Brian. If your life was a book, what chapter would this be called?
I would call this chapter The Appreciation of Focus. The understanding of being able to focus on what's important to me in my life. I talked about it earlier, creating my priorities and honoring my priority list to be the focus of my life. And I've gotten to it probably later than I should in my life, but I've seen everything in my life get better because my focus has gotten better. And so when I look at this chapter of my life, I appreciate the fact that I look around me on a daily basis and I try very hard not to take anything for granted. Again, I have a wonderful wife and a terrific marriage. I don't take that for granted. I choose her every day, and I will choose her every day for the rest of my life. I look at my kids, and I'm proud of how they're turning out. I really am. It's amazing. But I look business-wise. I'm at a point where I'm proud of where I am. The NBA stuff, I like my voice in that arena, in that media space. I'm comfortable with it. I'm comfortable with what I've done. So there's been a comfort in my own skin. But But again, it's been based upon the fact that my focus has just gotten better over the course of the last couple of years as I've gotten older. And I appreciate the fact of what that focus has been able to do. And it's made me appreciate the things around me that matter the most a heck of a lot more. And I'm grateful for that. So yes, the appreciation of focus is what I would call this chapter.
Love it. Brian, thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed this. Conscious I've overrun, but I appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights.
You've overrun, because once I start talking, Orla, it's very, very hard to stop me. So I thank you for having me. This was a really, really thoughtful interview that I appreciate the time that you took, and the questions were terrific. You're a brilliant host, and you're going places, and anything I can do to help you, please let me know.
Appreciate that, Brian. Thank you so much. I'll let you go, and I'll chat to you soon.
Thank you. Talk to you soon, Orla. You take care.